Have you ever noticed how the most respected and effective leaders throughout history rarely seem to rely on force, charisma, or authority alone to guide others? There's a quiet strength behind their influence, a kind of power that isn't shouted from a podium or written into a decree, but lived through daily choices, measured responses, and unshakable composure. This isn't just a coincidence, it's the result of what the ancient Stoics called self-mastery, the art of governing oneself before attempting to guide anyone else. Marcus Aurelius, one of history's most reflective leaders, put it plainly when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That strength, that inner command, is where genuine leadership begins. In this video, we're going to explore how some of the most influential figures in history built their lasting impact not on external rules, but on what I call invisible self-rules, principles they adhered to when no one was watching. These are the quiet disciplines of emotional regulation, intentional action, resilience in adversity, and clarity of purpose that separate truly great leaders from those who merely hold positions of power. Stoicism offers us a timeless framework for understanding how these internal practices translate into external influence. It teaches that leadership is first and foremost an inside job, a commitment to personal integrity that naturally extends into how we engage with the world. So I want to ask you a question, one that might shift how you see your own potential for influence. What if the greatest power lies not in controlling others, but in mastering yourself? Over the course of this video, we'll break down the core Stoic principles that empower this kind of leadership. We'll look at how emotional resilience can steady you during crises, why intentional action triumphs over reaction, and how defining your own values creates a foundation others instinctively trust. This isn't about becoming stoic in the modern sense of suppressing emotion. It's about cultivating strength through self-awareness, purpose through discipline, and influence through character. If you've ever wondered how to lead with more calm, clarity, and conviction, especially when things around you feel uncertain, this journey into the heart of Stoic leadership is for you. Every influential leader first conquered their own mind. That's not just a motivational saying, it's the very bedrock of Stoic philosophy. Think about it for a moment. How can anyone hope to guide a team, manage a complex project, or navigate a crisis if their own thoughts are scattered, their emotions volatile, and their reactions unpredictable? The Stoics argued that it's simply impossible. Inner chaos will always manifest as outer disorder. This is why the journey to authentic leadership doesn't start with learning how to manage others. It starts with the rigorous, often invisible, work of managing oneself. This idea was central to the teachings of Epictetus, a philosopher who began his life as a slave and became one of the most respected teachers of his time. He drew a clear, unbreakable line between what is within our control and what is not. Our opinions, our impulses, our desires, and our aversions, these are all squarely within our own power. Everything else, from the actions of other people to the state of the economy or the weather, is not. This distinction is the ultimate self-rule. It's the mental filter that allows a leader to conserve their energy, focus their efforts, and operate from a place of calm agency rather than anxious reactivity. Consider a leader facing a true crisis, perhaps a sudden market crash, a public relations disaster, or a critical system failure. The initial wave of panic is a natural human reaction. But the leader who has practiced this Stoic self-governance doesn't act from that panic. They might feel the fear, but they have a pre-established self-rule. I will only focus on what I can control. So instead of wasting energy on blame, outrage, or despair over the situation itself, things they cannot change, they immediately turn their attention to what they can influence. What is the next right step? What information needs to be gathered? How do we communicate with clarity and honesty to our team? This composure isn't a lack of feeling, it's the result of disciplined thought. It's the inner order creating outer stability, and it's what inspires confidence and calm in everyone around them. This kind of self-mastery is built through tiny, daily self-imposed rules. It's the decision to pause and breathe before responding to a provoking email. It's the commitment to plan your day around your core priorities instead of letting external demands dictate your actions. It's the practice of reflecting each evening on where your actions aligned with your values and where they strayed. These invisible structures create immense clarity and purpose. They mean that when pressure mounts, you don't have to figure out who you are or how you should act. You already know. Your self-rules become your compass. So where in your own life could introducing greater self-discipline fundamentally change your outcomes? Is it in how you start your mornings, how you handle criticism, or perhaps how you make decisions when you're feeling uncertain? How do the best leaders avoid pouring their energy into things they simply cannot change? This is where one of the most practical Stoic tools comes into play, a mental model that acts like a filter for every decision and every reaction. It's called the Dichotomy of Control, and it was most clearly articulated by the philosopher Epictetus. He taught that the foundation of a tranquil and effective life, and by extension, truly powerful leadership, is the ability to sort every single thing we encounter into one of two categories: those things that are within our control and those that are not. Our own judgments, our impulses, our desires, our aversions, these are up to us. The actions of other people, the past, the weather, market fluctuations, public opinion, these are not. It sounds simple, almost too simple, but the application of this rule is where the magic happens for a leader. This framework is not about passive acceptance or giving up on ambitious goals. It's about strategic energy allocation. A leader who internalizes this self-rule stops fighting against the current and starts steering the boat with precision. They understand that getting angry about a delayed flight wastes mental resources that could be spent preparing for the meeting upon arrival. They know that obsessing over a competitor's unexpected move is futile, but analyzing how their own team can adapt is profoundly powerful. This mental shift liberates them from the roller coaster of external events. They can receive bad news, acknowledge the difficulty, and then immediately turn their focus to the one thing that always remains within their sphere of influence: their response. We can see this principle in action with a leader like Abraham Lincoln during the American Civil War. The outcome of battles, the opinions of his political rivals, the deeply entrenched attitudes of the era, these were largely outside his direct control. He could influence them, but he could not command them. What was within his control: his unwavering commitment to preserving the Union, his choice to fill his cabinet with former opponents because he valued their talent, his discipline in crafting his arguments with empathy and logic, and his resilience in the face of relentless personal and public criticism. He channeled all of his energy into these domains, the domains of his own character, judgment, and actions. He didn't waste his finite energy despairing over things he could not change. He invested it entirely in the things he could. This focus is what allowed him to act decisively and hold the course through unimaginable turbulence. This is the ultimate leadership superpower that stems from this self-rule, the ability to act with conviction without being emotionally derailed by the results, because your satisfaction comes from having done your best with what was yours to manage. You can launch a product with excellence, but you cannot control whether it becomes a viral sensation. You can prepare for a crucial negotiation meticulously, but you cannot control the other party's mood that day. The leader who is attached to the uncontrollable outcome lives in a state of constant anxiety. The leader who is attached to their own effort, their own integrity, and their own reasoned action operates from a place of unshakable calm. So take a moment to bring this into your own world. Look at a challenge you're facing right now. What aspect of this situation is truly Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter within your influence? Is it your preparation, your attitude, the clarity of your communication, your next single action? Focus your power there and watch how that focused energy changes everything. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher and advisor to an emperor, offered a powerful insight into this very challenge. He wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." This gets to the heart of a crucial Stoic ideal known as apathy, which is often misunderstood. It doesn't mean becoming apathetic or devoid of all feeling. Instead, it signifies a state of freedom from the destructive, overwhelming passions that cloud judgment and derail progress. It's about not being ruled by your emotions, especially in high-stakes situations where clarity is everything. For a leader, this emotional self-regulation isn't a nice-to-have soft skill. It's the very bedrock of stability that allows them to inspire confidence and navigate chaos. Think about the last time you saw a leader truly lose their cool, shouting in frustration, radiating anxiety during a meeting, or visibly crumbling under bad news. What happened to the morale and focus of everyone around them? It likely plummeted. Their emotional storm became everyone's problem, creating a ripple effect of distraction and fear. Now contrast that with a leader who practices this Stoic form of resilience. They receive the same difficult news. They feel the same initial jolt of surprise or disappointment. Stoicism doesn't ask you to stop being human. But then their invisible self-rules engage. They take a metaphorical step back from the raw feeling. They might even name it to themselves. This is fear, or this is anger. By doing so, they create a critical space between the external event and their response. That space is where their power lies. It's where they choose to respond with measured thought instead of reacting with unchecked emotion. A modern example of this principle in action can be found in leaders like Jacinda Ardern, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, who was repeatedly tested by national crises, from a devastating terrorist attack to a global pandemic. Her public demeanor was consistently characterized by a profound sense of calm, empathy, and resolve, never by panic or visible anger. This wasn't an absence of feeling. It was the visible result of immense emotional self-regulation. In the immediate aftermath of the Christchurch mosque shootings, she could have given in to outrage or despair. Instead, her response was intentional and compassionate, focused on unifying a grieving nation and enacting swift, meaningful policy change. Her composure provided a stable center for an entire country in shock, demonstrating that true strength isn't about suppressing emotion, but about channeling it into purposeful, effective action. This kind of resilience is built through daily practice long before a crisis ever hits. It's the practice of pausing before responding to a provocative comment. It's the habit of reframing a frustrating delay not as a personal offense, but as a neutral event to be managed. It's the discipline of mentally preparing for the day's potential stressors each morning, so they lose their power to surprise and destabilize you. These small, consistent acts of emotional governance strengthen your resilience like a muscle, making you more capable of handling larger pressures when they inevitably arrive. So let's bring this into your own experience. When did your emotional response recently cloud your judgment? Perhaps it was a flash of irritation during a conversation that led you to say something you regretted, or a wave of anxiety about a future possibility that paralyzed your decision-making. Recognizing that moment is the first step toward building your own apathy, not to feel less, but to be led by your reasoning mind more. Influential leaders don't just act, they act with intention. This distinction might seem subtle, but it's the very difference between building something that lasts and simply reacting to whatever the day throws at you. Stoicism teaches that our power lies not in the sheer volume of our actions, but in their quality and alignment with our deepest values. It's the practice of pausing between an external event and your response to ask one critical question. Is what I'm about to do truly reflective of who I aspire to be, or is it just a knee-jerk reaction driven by fear, pride, or the desire for immediate gratification? This is where invisible self-rules come into play. They act as a personal constitution, a set of guiding principles that help you bypass impulsive behavior and choose actions that are meaningful, measured, and wise. Marcus Aurelius constantly reinforced this idea in his private writings, which we now know as meditations. He wasn't writing for an audience, he was reminding himself of the standards he needed to uphold. In one passage, he instructs himself, "You always own the option of having no opinion. There is never any need to get worked up or to trouble your soul about things you can't control. These things are not asking to be judged by you. Leave them alone." This is a profound self-rule for intentional action. It's not about doing nothing. It's about refusing to let external events hijack your internal state and dictate your behavior. It's the discipline of ensuring that your actions spring from a place of reasoned choice rather than unchecked emotion. Consider a modern business scenario where this principle plays out decisively. Imagine a company facing aggressive, perhaps even unfair, competition. The reactive approach, often fueled by ego and fear, might be to immediately slash prices, launch a negative counter-campaign, or make a frantic pivot to try and mimic the competitor's strategy. These actions feel busy and decisive in the moment, but they are often wasteful and misaligned with the company's core strengths and long-term vision. Now consider the leader who operates from a Stoic self-rule of intentionality. They feel the same pressure, the same urge to strike back quickly, but their discipline forces a pause. They return to their values, perhaps integrity, customer focus, and innovation. Instead of reacting, they act with intention. They might double down on their unique value proposition, improve their product based on customer feedback rather than competitor moves, or communicate transparently with their team about the challenge without spreading panic. This deliberate approach might seem slower, but it builds sustainable success and reinforces a culture of stability and purpose. History provides a powerful example in the actions of Abraham Lincoln following the Union's devastating defeat at the Battle of Bull Run. The public and political pressure for an immediate, dramatic reaction was immense. Panic and calls for sweeping, impulsive changes in strategy were everywhere. But Lincoln, known for his thoughtful and deliberate nature, resisted the urge to react purely from a place of fear or a need to appear decisively in control. Instead, he intentionally took the time to assess, learn, and recalibrate. He understood that a reactionary move could lose the war, while a purposeful, strategic action could eventually win it. His intentionality, his refusal to be rushed into a poor decision by external pressure, allowed him to ultimately guide the Union toward a more effective, long-term strategy. This practice of intentional action is like building a mental moat around your decision-making process. It protects you from the invading armies of distraction, panic, and social pressure. It means that your energy is spent on moves that actually matter, that move you toward your goals instead of simply deflecting the latest annoyance. It turns leadership from a series of frantic reactions into a graceful and powerful dance. So, bring this down to your own life for a moment. Look at your to-do list, your calendar, your inbox. What one change could you make today to ensure your actions are more intentional? Could it be instituting a 5-minute planning session each morning to align your tasks with your priorities? Could it be the simple rule of taking 3 deep breaths before responding to any request or criticism? Greatness is often hidden in daily routines, not in grand, sweeping gestures. It's the quiet, almost invisible repetition of small acts that forges the kind of discipline capable of weathering any storm. For the Stoic leader, this isn't just about productivity hacks or optimized schedules. It's about the deliberate construction of a character that remains steady because its foundation is laid, brick by brick, every single day. These daily habits are the practical application of those invisible self-rules, the training ground where self-mastery moves from theory into lived reality. They are how we actively sculpt our judgment and our resilience, making sure that when a true crisis arrives, our response isn't a desperate improvisation but the natural outcome of who we have consistently practiced being. The Stoics were profound advocates of this daily practice, designing specific exercises to reinforce self-accountability and align their actions with their values. 2 of the most powerful were their morning and evening reflections. The day would begin with a Premeditatio Malorum, a premeditation of potential challenges. This wasn't about cultivating pessimism, it was a mental inoculation. By visualizing the obstacles, interruptions, and frustrations that might arise, they robbed those events of their power to surprise and derail them. A leader might mentally rehearse a difficult conversation, a missed deadline, or a negative market shift. By facing these possibilities in the calm of the morning, they enter the day prepared, not fearful. They've already reaffirmed their self-rule. My peace does not depend on everything going perfectly. Then, as the day closed, the practice shifted to an evening review, a ritual of honest self-examination that Seneca frequently wrote about with powerful clarity. In his letters, he describes retreating into himself each night and posing a series of probing questions. What bad habit have you cured today? He would ask himself. What fault have you resisted? In what respect are you better? This wasn't an exercise in self-criticism for its own sake, but a meticulous audit of his progress. It was about holding himself accountable to his own standards when no one else was watching. For a modern leader, this could translate to a simple journaling practice. Where did I act with intention today, and where did I react impulsively? Did my actions align with my core values? Was my energy spent on things within my control? This daily audit closes the loop, turning experiences into wisdom and ensuring that every day, no matter how chaotic, contributes to your growth. We see this principle embodied in leaders across history who are known for their rigorous, self-imposed routines. Take someone like Benjamin Franklin, who, while not a Stoic in the classical sense, deeply understood the power of habitual self-rule. He famously kept a detailed chart tracking his adherence to 13 personal virtues, including temperance, order, and humility, giving himself a black mark for each daily infraction. His entire life was a testament to the belief that consistent, daily effort in controlling the small things was the only path to mastering the large ones. Or consider the disciplined routines of a modern athlete like Serena Williams, whose legendary training regimen wasn't just about physical prowess but about mental fortitude. The thousands of hours spent repeating the same strokes, the same drills, built the unshakable composure she displayed on the world's biggest stages under immense pressure. That is Stoic discipline in action, the daily grind creating effortless grace when it matters most. The beauty of this approach is that it makes the abstract concept of strength incredibly practical. You don't build resilience by simply hoping you'll be strong during a crisis. You build it by making your bed each morning with attention, by committing to that daily walk without negotiation, by choosing the nutritious meal over the convenient junk food. Each of these tiny acts is a vote for self-command. Each one reinforces the neural pathways of discipline, making it easier to choose the harder right over the easier wrong when the stakes are high. It's the repetition that does the work, quietly convincing your deepest self that you are someone who follows through, who keeps promises to yourself, and who can be relied upon. So the question isn't whether you have time for another life hack. The real question is, what single, small, daily habit could you introduce? Or perhaps what one could you remove that would most powerfully strengthen your own practice of self-rule? Is it 5 minutes of silent planning each morning, a screen-free hour before bed, a commitment to truly listen without interruption in your next conversation? Identify that one lever and pull it consistently. The compound interest on that small daily investment will build a fortune of inner strength. Epictetus, the former slave who became a guiding voice of Stoic thought, offered a deceptively simple piece of advice that cuts to the heart of effective leadership. He said, if you seek tranquility, do less, but he wasn't talking about being lazy. He immediately clarifies, not less action, but less distraction. Do only what is essential. This gets at a profound leadership skill that is more crucial now than ever before, the practice of Stoic mindfulness and presence. In a world of endless notifications, multitasking, and constant partial attention, the ability to be fully and completely engaged with the task or the person in front of you is not just a pleasant trait, it's a radical act of discipline and a tremendous source of power. It's the practice of directing your attention, your most valuable resource, with intention. This kind of presence is the ultimate antidote to distraction, and distraction is the enemy of sound decision-making. A leader whose mind is scattered across a dozen different tabs, emails, and worries cannot possibly access the clarity needed to navigate complex challenges. The Stoic practice of mindfulness is about cultivating a laser-like focus on the present moment, treating it as the only reality you can actually influence. The past is a memory, the future is a prediction, but this moment, this conversation, this single task, this is where your power resides. When you are fully present, you notice the subtle details others miss. You hear the hesitation in a team member's voice that suggests they aren't fully on board with a plan. You catch the small error in a report before it becomes a catastrophic problem. You absorb information more completely and respond with greater wisdom because your cognitive resources aren't being drained by mental clutter about what happened yesterday or what might happen tomorrow. We can see this principle translated into modern leadership practices everywhere we look. The concept of deep work or focused work blocks is a direct application of this Stoic attention. It's the self-imposed rule of turning off all notifications, closing the door, and dedicating a set period to a single, cognitively demanding task. This isn't just about efficiency, it's about respect for the work itself and for your own capacity to do it well. Similarly, the practice of mindful listening is a powerful leadership tool rooted in presence. How many meetings have you been in where everyone is physically in the room but mentally composing their next email? The leader who practices mindful listening puts their entire device away, makes eye contact, and truly hears not just the words being said but the meaning behind them. They are not formulating their response while the other person is still talking. This level of engagement makes people feel valued, heard, and respected, which in turn builds immense loyalty and trust. A powerful anecdote that illustrates this comes from the world of surgery, a field where presence is quite literally a matter of life and death. Renowned surgeons often describe entering a state of flow or hyper-focus in the operating room. The outside world vanishes, their entire universe narrows to the procedure, their team, and the patient. There is no room for distraction, for ego, for worrying about a previous case or the administrative paperwork waiting in their office. This total immersion allows for peak performance and flawless execution. Now, translate that to a business leader navigating a high-stakes negotiation or a critical product launch. The principle is identical. The leader who can mentally enter that boardroom flow state, fully engaged with the dynamics of the room, the nuances of the proposal, and the concerns of the other party, operates at a completely different level than one who is mentally absent. They are responsive, agile, and deeply connected to the reality of the situation, not their mental narrative about it. This ability to be present is a skill built through consistent daily practice. It might start with something as simple as committing to drink your morning coffee without looking at your phone, fully tasting it and noticing the warmth of the cup. It could be the discipline of taking 3 deep breaths before walking into a meeting to center yourself and leave your previous distractions at the door. Each time you gently guide your attention back from its wanderings to the here and now, you are strengthening your mindfulness muscle. You are writing a silent, invisible self-rule that says, "This deserves my full attention." So consider your own patterns for a moment. When do you find yourself most distracted? Is it during virtual meetings when the temptation to check other screens is high? Is it when you're supposed to be spending quality time with family but your mind is still at the office? Or is it when you're working on a strategic plan but constantly interrupted by the ping of incoming messages? Identifying that weak spot is the first step. Now, how could a greater practice of presence help? What one rule could you set for yourself, a rule no one else would even see, that would help you reclaim your focus and operate from a place of calm, undivided attention in that specific area of your life? True influence grows from integrity, not manipulation. This is perhaps the most fundamental and radical of all the Stoic self-rules, and it stands in stark contrast to so much of what we're taught about power today. The world often tells us that influence is about leverage, negotiation tactics, charisma, or even coercion. But the Stoics argued that all of that is a fragile, hollow imitation of real power. The only thing that is truly, unshakably good, the only foundation for leadership that cannot be taken from you, is your own character, your virtue. For them, virtue wasn't a vague moral ideal. It was a practical, 4-part toolkit for effective living: wisdom to see the world clearly and make sound judgments, justice to treat others with fairness and contribute to the common good, courage to act rightly in the face of fear or adversity, and temperance to exercise self-control and moderation in all things. When a leader's actions are consistently guided by these principles, they build a form of trust that is incredibly resilient because it is earned, not demanded. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the known world, constantly reminded himself that his station was meaningless without this inner foundation. He wrote in his private meditations, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." And elsewhere, he stated plainly that the highest good is a mind that aligns itself with reason and virtue. For a Roman emperor, this was a profound commitment. He could have easily relied on the sheer force of his authority, on the fear his legions inspired, or on the political machinations of the court. Yet his personal writing reveals a man deeply concerned with whether he was living up to his own standards of justice, whether he was being courageous in his duties, and whether he was exercising wisdom in his judgments. His power was immense, but he believed it was only legitimate if it was an extension of a virtuous character. This internal compass allowed him to lead an empire through war and plague without becoming a tyrant, because his primary audience was not his subjects but his own conscience. We can see a powerful modern example of this principle in the leadership of someone like Nelson Mandela. His 27 years of imprisonment could have easily justified a lifetime of bitterness and a lust for retributive power. Instead, when he finally emerged and eventually became president of South Africa, he championed reconciliation and justice over vengeance. He understood that true, lasting influence, the kind that could heal a fractured nation, would not come from manipulating old wounds or consolidating power for his own group. It had to be built on the universal virtues of justice and wisdom. He courageously reached out to his former oppressors, not because it was easy, but because it was right. He exercised immense temperance in not abusing the power he had finally attained. His moral consistency, his unwavering commitment to these higher principles, is what earned him the profound trust and loyalty not just of his followers but of the world. His power was not in his title, it was in his impeccable character which made his title meaningful. This creates a fascinating and empowering inversion of how we typically think about leadership development. We often focus on acquiring external skills, better public speaking, more effective delegation, learning new technologies, and while those have their place, the Stoics would argue that the most critical work is internal. It's the meticulous, daily effort to strengthen your virtue. Every time you choose to be honest when a white lie would be easier, you are strengthening justice. Every time you delve deeper to understand a complex problem instead of opting for a superficial solution, you are cultivating wisdom. Every time you speak up for what is right despite your fear of conflict, you are practicing courage. And every time you walk away from a petty argument or resist an unhealthy temptation, you are building temperance. These are the invisible reps that build the muscle of virtuous character. And it is this character that becomes your most reliable source of influence, because people are drawn to those they know they can trust implicitly. So let's bring this home. Of these four cardinal virtues, wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, which one do you feel you need to strengthen most in your own leadership journey? Is it the courage to have a difficult conversation you've been avoiding? The justice to ensure everyone on your team feels heard and treated fairly? The wisdom to pause and seek counsel before a big decision? Or the temperance to manage your reactions when you're feeling stressed or provoked? What if the very obstacles that frustrate and block you are actually the stepping stones you need to reach a higher level of strength and understanding? This isn't just optimistic thinking, it's a core Stoic discipline known as the art of reframing, and it's one of the most powerful invisible self-rules a leader can adopt. The Stoics didn't believe in merely enduring hardship. They believed in actively transforming it, in taking the raw material of a setback and forging from it a new advantage. They practiced seeing every difficulty, every piece of bad luck, and every failure not as a punishment or a detour, but as essential training for the mind and character. This shift in perspective turns a leader from a victim of circumstance into an alchemist of experience, someone who uses pressure to create diamonds. Seneca, who faced exile, chronic illness, and ultimately a death sentence from his own student, the Emperor Nero, wrote extensively about this transformative practice. In one of his most famous letters, he argues that difficulty is what creates strength. He uses the powerful analogy of a tree. A tree that grows in a sunny valley becomes tall and beautiful, but weak. It is shattered by the first strong storm, but a tree that grows on a windy mountain ridge, forced to cling to the rocks with gnarled roots, becomes tough, resilient, and unbreakable. It is the struggle against the wind that gives it the strength to survive. For a leader, this means that the comfortable, easy path might produce quick growth, but it creates a fragile kind of power. The challenging, obstacle-filled path is what forges the unshakable resilience required for true, lasting influence. Seneca urges us to welcome hardship as a tough but fair trainer, writing, "Discomfort is the road to mastery." You must endure the wet and the cold of the mountain pass to earn the breathtaking view from the summit. We can see this principle embodied in the life of Thomas Edison, a figure who practically turned reframing failure into an industrial process. When his laboratory in Menlo Park burned to the ground in a devastating fire, destroying years of painstaking research and prototypes, he didn't collapse in despair. He reportedly told his son, "Go get your mother and all her friends. They'll never see a fire like this again." Then, with the embers still smoldering, he declared, "There is great value in disaster. All our mistakes are burned up. Thank God we can start anew." This wasn't denial, it was a profound act of cognitive reframing. He immediately saw the obstacle not as a total loss, but as an opportunity, a forced clearing of the slate that allowed him to rebuild without the burden of past errors. He used the catastrophe as a stepping stone to even greater innovation, freed from the constraints of his previous designs. His resilience was born from this unshakable self-rule. There is no such thing as waste, only data and experience. This practice is what separates a reactive leader from a proactive one. The reactive leader sees a market crash and panics, interpreting it only as a threat to survival. The leader who has internalized this Stoic self-rule sees the same crash and asks, "What opportunities does this reset create? What outdated assumptions has it revealed? How can we position ourselves to be stronger when the recovery begins?" They use the adversity as a stress test for their business model, identifying weaknesses and innovating new solutions they would never have been forced to develop in easier times. The obstacle becomes the catalyst for necessary change and creativity that complacency would have otherwise prevented. It's not about enjoying the pain, it's about respecting its role as a teacher. So bring this powerful reframe into your own life. Look at a current challenge that feels like a brick wall. It might be a project that just failed, a difficult relationship, a financial pressure, or a health concern. Now ask yourself the transformative question: if I chose to see this not as a pure obstacle, but as a form of training, what is it teaching me? Is it training me in patience, in humility, in better communication, in smarter planning, in courage, in detachment? By reinterpreting the problem as a drill rather than a defeat, you instantly reclaim your agency. You are no longer being punished by the universe. You are in a gym, and your personal trainer has just increased the weight to make you stronger. What current difficulty in your life can you, starting right now, choose to see as essential training for the leader you are becoming? The founder of Stoicism, Zeno of Citium, offered a piece of wisdom that runs counter to much of modern leadership advice. He said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen more than we speak." This isn't just a clever quip about physiology, it's a profound strategic principle. In a world that often equates leadership with having the loudest voice and the quickest answer, the Stoics championed a different kind of power, the power of silence and restraint. This invisible self-rule isn't about being quiet out of shyness or uncertainty. It's a disciplined practice of creating space. It's the conscious choice to listen deeply, to observe keenly, and to resist the primal urge to immediately fill every silence with your own voice. Leaders who master this art discover that by speaking less, they actually gain more insight, more respect, and ultimately more authority. When a leader exercises restraint in speech, something remarkable happens. They become a vessel for information rather than a source of noise. In a meeting, instead of jumping in immediately with their own opinion, they create a vacuum that others feel compelled to fill. This is where true insight is born. You hear the unvarnished perspectives of your team, the subtle concerns they might otherwise suppress if you spoke first, and the creative ideas that need a moment of silence to emerge. This practice transforms a leader from a director who must have all the answers into a facilitator who draws out the collective intelligence of the group. Furthermore, restraint in reaction is equally powerful. When presented with criticism or a provocative idea, the leader who has cultivated the self-rule of a measured pause avoids the defensive, knee-jerk reaction that shuts down dialogue and erodes trust. That moment of silence signals thoughtfulness and control. It communicates that your response is a considered choice, not an emotional outburst, and that alone commands a deep and resonant authority. A masterclass in this Stoic restraint can be found in the leadership of Queen Elizabeth II. Throughout her unprecedented 70-year reign, her most powerful tool was often her silence. She was navigating a constantly shifting political and social landscape, where a single ill-considered public comment could trigger an international incident or a constitutional crisis. Her role demanded an almost superhuman level of measured communication. She listened far more than she spoke, absorbing briefings, understanding the nuances of complex issues, and observing the characters of the countless leaders she met. When she did speak, her words were carefully chosen, deliberate, and carried immense weight precisely because they were so rare. This wasn't a lack of opinion. It was the ultimate discipline of understanding that her influence was magnified by her restraint. Her silence was not empty. It was full of presence, attention, and power, allowing her to remain a steady, unifying figure above the fray of daily politics. This principle extends far beyond the throne room and into every conference room and conversation. Think about the last time you were in a negotiation or a difficult conversation. The human impulse is to talk, to explain, to justify, to fill the uncomfortable silence with sound. But the person who holds their tongue often holds the power. They make the other party nervous, prompting them to reveal more than they intended or to improve their offer simply to break the tension, or consider feedback sessions. A leader who lectures an employee with a monologue about what went wrong learns very little. A leader who asks a single, clear question and then falls silent, creating a safe space for an honest answer, gains invaluable truth. This practice of intentional silence is a strategic tool for gathering intelligence, building rapport, and demonstrating a confidence that doesn't require constant validation through speech. So we come to a question that can reveal so much about our own habits of communication. Look back on your own interactions this past week. When has speaking less or waiting just a few seconds longer before you responded served you better than filling the air with your immediate thoughts? Was it in a meeting where you learned a critical piece of information because you weren't talking over it? Was it in a disagreement where a pause allowed you to respond with wisdom instead of anger? Or was it simply in a moment where your silent presence was more comforting than any words could have been? Influential leaders invest in actions, not attachments. This is one of the most liberating yet challenging Stoic self-rules to internalize, because it asks us to fundamentally shift where we place our sense of satisfaction and self-worth. We live in a world that is obsessed with results: quarterly earnings, win-loss records, vanity metrics, and final grades. It's natural to tie our happiness and our evaluation of our own performance to these external outcomes. But the Stoics, particularly Epictetus, identified this attachment as a primary source of anxiety, fear, and ultimately poor decision-making. His famous teaching, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens," is the ultimate mantra for this practice. It draws a clear and empowering line. Your effort, your intention, your preparation, your integrity, these are 100% within your control. The final outcome, however, is influenced by a million other factors you cannot command. Luck, timing, other people's decisions, market fluctuations, even the weather. To attach your peace of mind to that unpredictable external result is to hand over the keys to your emotional state to forces you cannot possibly manage. This detachment is not apathy or a lack of ambition. It's the opposite. It's about caring so deeply about your work that you pour your entire being into the process, while simultaneously releasing your grip on the specific result you think should happen. This mindset is a petri dish for innovation. When a leader is not paralyzed by the fear of a specific outcome failing, they grant themselves and their team the psychological safety to experiment, to take calculated risks, and to potentially fail forward. A team that knows their leader values their earnest effort and learned lessons just as much as, if not more than, a successful outcome will be far more creative and resilient. They're not constantly looking over their shoulder, terrified of making a mistake. They're focused on the work itself, which is where all truly great results are ultimately born. Consider a product development team working on a groundbreaking new technology. The leader who is overly attached to the outcome might demand unrealistic deadlines, cut corners on testing to get to market faster, and instill a culture of fear where employees are reluctant to report problems or propose unconventional ideas that might not work. Their anxiety about the result beating a competitor or hitting a revenue target corrupts the entire process. Now, imagine a leader who has embraced this stoic self-rule. They set a clear, ambitious vision and ensure the team has everything they need to execute with excellence. They are deeply engaged in the daily actions, the quality of the code, the elegance of the design, the rigor of the testing. But they hold the final market reception lightly. If the product succeeds, they celebrate the team's excellent execution. If it fails to gain traction, they lead a blameless post-mortem focused not on assigning fault, but on extracting wisdom. They ask, what did we learn about our customers? What assumptions were proven wrong? How does this inform our next best action? This detachment from the specific outcome of success or failure allows for crystal clear decision-making rooted in reality and continuous improvement, not in ego or fear. This philosophy finds a powerful modern parallel in the concept of the growth mindset pioneered by psychologist Carol Dweck. It's the idea that we should prize the process of learning and growth over the validation of a fixed label like smart or successful. A student with a fixed mindset is attached to the outcome of an A+ and may cheat or avoid challenging subjects to protect that identity. A student with a growth mindset is attached to the action of learning itself. A lower grade is not a verdict on their intelligence, but valuable feedback on what they need to study next. The Stoic leader operates from a growth mindset on an organizational level. They are gardeners, not judges. They focus on tending to the soil, providing water and sunlight, and pulling weeds the actions within their control. They understand that while they can't force the plant to grow, they can create the conditions where flourishing is most likely. This shift from controller to cultivator is what makes their leadership both powerful and sustainable. So, where in your own life are you overly attached to a specific outcome? Is it a promotion you feel you must get? A deal you feel you must close? Your child's acceptance into a specific college? What would it feel like to redirect all that anxious energy away from the result and pour it entirely into the actions within your control? Doing your job with excellence, preparing for the negotiation with thoroughness, or supporting your child's learning journey regardless of the destination? People follow what they see, not just what they hear. This simple truth is the engine of authentic leadership, and it's where the invisible self-rules of Stoicism become visibly powerful. You can give the most inspiring speeches, you can write the most eloquent value statements, and you can design the most comprehensive policies, but none of it will truly land if your daily actions tell a different story. Your team, your family, your colleagues, they are not listening to your words nearly as closely as they are watching your behavior. They are looking for the proof, for the congruence between what you say is important and how you actually live. This is where credibility is built, not in the grand pronouncements, but in the quiet, consistent alignment of your actions with your stated principles. A leader who models their values teaches more powerfully than any instructor because their life becomes the lesson. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, understood this responsibility at the deepest level. He could have easily remained in the comfort of his palace in Rome, issuing decrees and commanding his legions from a distance. Yet he spent over a decade of his reign on the harsh, dangerous frontiers of the empire, campaigning alongside his soldiers. He ate the same simple food, slept in the same tents, and endured the same brutal conditions. He didn't just preach about duty and resilience, he embodied it day after grueling day. This wasn't for show, it was the natural expression of his personal philosophy. By leading from the front, he demonstrated that the virtues he wrote about in his private journal, courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom, were not abstract ideals but practical rules for conduct, even for the most powerful man in the world. His actions built an unbreakable bond of loyalty and trust with his troops because they knew he would never ask them to endure something he wasn't willing to endure himself. His example was his authority. This principle of leading by example is just as critical in our modern contexts, far from ancient battlefields. Consider a CEO who passionately champions a culture of work-life balance and mental well-being for her employees. She gives speeches about unplugging after hours and taking vacation time, but then she consistently sends emails at 11 o'clock at night and brags about never taking a day off. Her actions completely undermine her words, breeding cynicism and distrust. The invisible self-rule she is actually modeling is that burnout is a badge of honor and that her stated values are just corporate lip service. Now contrast that with a leader who truly internalizes this Stoic practice. If they value innovation, they publicly celebrate intelligent failures and reward risk-taking, not just safe successes. If they preach transparency, they are the first to admit their own mistakes in a meeting, showing that accountability starts at the top. If they advocate for respect, they actively listen to the most junior person in the room with the same attention they give to a senior executive. Their consistent behavior makes the value tangible and therefore believable. This kind of integrity creates a powerful ripple effect. When a leader's actions are consistently aligned with their values, it sets a clear and safe standard for everyone else. It gives people permission to also act with integrity, because they know their leader will not punish them for living up to the shared values. It builds a culture of trust where people don't have to waste energy deciphering mixed messages or managing a leader's hypocrisy. They can instead channel all their energy into the shared mission, confident that the rules of the game are fair and that everyone, especially the person at the top, is playing by them. The leader's example becomes the living constitution of the organization, a constant and reliable reference point for what truly matters. This is how invisible self-rules become visible cultural norms, transforming a group of individuals into a cohesive, high-trust team. So this invites a moment of honest and perhaps uncomfortable self-reflection. It's a question that requires looking in the mirror with the clarity the Stoics demanded of themselves. Where does your own behavior contradict your values? We all have these gaps, it's part of being human. Perhaps you value health and vitality, but you consistently sacrifice sleep for more work. Maybe you preach the importance of continuous learning, but you haven't read a book or taken a course outside your field in years. You might tell your team that feedback is a gift, but you become visibly defensive or dismissive when someone offers you a constructive critique. Identifying one of these contradictions is not an admission of failure. It's the first and most courageous step toward genuine leadership. It's where you can choose to rewrite an invisible self-rule, to consciously align a single action with a deeply held belief, and in doing so, start to teach by example in a way that commands respect and inspires others to follow. How can a practice that asks you to vividly imagine everything going wrong possibly make you stronger and more fearless? It sounds like a recipe for anxiety, a way to invite worry into your life. But the Stoics, particularly Seneca, developed this very technique known as Premeditatio Malorum, or the premeditation of evils, as a powerful tool to inoculate the mind against the shock of adversity. The core idea is not to dwell on fear, but to disarm it, by voluntarily revisiting our deepest worries in the safe space of our own minds. We rob future calamities of their element of surprise and their power to paralyze us. It's a form of mental fire drill. We practice the emergency so that if the alarm ever truly sounds, our response is not blind panic, but a calm and rehearsed execution of a plan. Seneca was a master of this practice. In his letters, he regularly advised his friend Lucilius to set aside time each day to mentally rehearse potential losses and difficulties. He didn't do this to be morbid, but to achieve a state of profound gratitude and readiness. He would contemplate the loss of his status, his wealth, his health, and even his loved ones. By doing so, he achieved two remarkable things. First, he diminished the terror of these events. By facing them in his imagination, they became familiar, manageable concepts rather than unimaginable horrors. Second, and perhaps more importantly, he cultivated a deep appreciation for everything he currently had. Walking through his home after such an exercise, he wasn't taking his possessions for granted. He was seeing them as the temporary gifts they were, which filled him with a sense of thankfulness rather than entitlement. This is the beautiful paradox of negative visualization. By consciously considering the absence of the good things in our lives, we actually enhance our enjoyment of them while they are here. We can see a powerful, practical application of this principle in the world of high-stakes preparedness. Every major airline, for instance, requires its pilots to undergo extensive training in flight simulators. In these simulators, they don't practice clear skies, perfect landing scenarios. They practice the worst-case situations: double engine failure at takeoff, violent wind shear on final approach, catastrophic system malfunctions. They are literally practicing Premeditatio Malorum. By repeatedly facing these virtual disasters, the neural pathways of panic are replaced with the pathways of procedure. When a real crisis occurs, and they do, the pilot's reaction isn't raw fear. It's a calm, almost automatic response. We've been here before, the mind says, even if only in simulation. I know what to do. The emotional impact of the emergency is drastically reduced because it lacks the element of shocking novelty. This Stoic tool is incredibly relevant for modern leaders who face immense uncertainty. A CEO might use it before a major product launch by asking, "What if it fails completely? What is our plan B? How will we communicate that to our team and our investors?" By mentally walking through that scenario, the potential failure loses its fangs. It becomes a manageable outcome with a set of responses, rather than a ghost haunting the boardroom. A project manager might use it at the kickoff of a complex initiative, brainstorming every possible thing that could go wrong, from key team members leaving to critical technology failing. This isn't pessimism, it's proactive risk mitigation. It allows the team to build contingencies and safeguards into the plan from the very beginning, making the entire operation more resilient. The leader who has premeditated challenges is not caught off guard. They are prepared, and that preparedness radiates a calm confidence that stabilizes everyone around them. So let's bring this from the philosophical and the professional into the deeply personal. Take a moment to look inward at a specific worry that might be occupying your thoughts. It could be a fear of public speaking, anxiety about a financial investment, or concern for a loved one's health. Now apply the Stoic drill. What fear would lose its power over you if you took the time to prepare for it mentally? If you're afraid of a presentation failing, mentally walk through the scenario. What would you do if the technology fails, if you forget your lines, if the audience seems disinterested? By visualizing these challenges and your calm, reasoned responses to them, you transform the unknown into the familiar. You are not inviting the disaster. You are building a mental fortress against the anxiety it causes, ensuring that no matter what the future holds, you have already visited that territory in your mind and you are ready to face it with courage and clarity. Epictetus, who began his life with nothing and found his greatest wealth in philosophy, put it perfectly when he said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." This gets to the very heart of a Stoic principle that is incredibly countercultural today. That true inner freedom and clarity of leadership are not achieved by accumulating more, but by consciously and courageously needing less. This isn't about adopting a specific aesthetic of minimalism or living in a tiny house, though it might include those things. It's about the internal, psychological work of identifying and then systematically reducing our dependencies. Every dependency we have on a certain status, a particular luxury, the constant approval of others, or even a rigid outcome, is a potential point of leverage the outside world has over us. It's a chain that can be yanked, pulling us off our center and into reactive, fearful behavior. The leader who is free from these excessive wants operates from a place of profound autonomy and focus because their sense of self and their capacity for action is no longer tied to external validation or possessions. This practice starts with the fundamental Stoic exercise of distinguishing between our needs and our wants, a discipline Epictetus hammered home. He taught his students to regularly ask themselves, "Is this within my control?" but also, "Is this essential?" A need is something that is truly necessary for our survival and our ability to fulfill our duties: basic nourishment, shelter, the tools of our trade. A want, however, is everything else, the endless amplification of those basics into luxuries, the desire for prestige, the craving for comfort and convenience. The trouble isn't that wants are inherently bad, it's that we so often mistake them for needs. We convince ourselves we need the newest model of car, the corner office, the public recognition, the 5-star hotel. When we do that, we voluntarily hand over our freedom. We become anxious about losing these things, we make decisions to acquire or protect them, and we expend immense mental energy on maintaining a lifestyle rather than on pursuing a purpose. A powerful modern example of this principle in action is the late Steve Jobs. For much of his life, his personal aesthetic was famously minimalist. His iconic black turtleneck, blue jeans, and sneakers weren't just a fashion statement, they were a deliberate cognitive strategy. He explained that by removing the daily decision of what to wear, he conserved his mental energy for the decisions that truly mattered, the ones about design, innovation, and the future of technology. He applied the same philosophy of simplicity to Apple's products, championing clean, uncluttered design that removed unnecessary complexity. This external minimalism was a reflection of an internal commitment to focus. By reducing his dependencies on variety in his wardrobe and clutter in his environment, he strengthened his autonomy to concentrate his entire being on his one core mission. He needed very little to be effective, and that gave him tremendous freedom to create. This Stoic simplicity extends far beyond physical possessions into the psychological realm. The most draining dependencies are often intangible: the need for constant approval, the addiction to busyness as a badge of honor, the reliance on a title for authority, or the attachment to a specific 5-year plan. A leader who is dependent on applause will struggle to make the tough, unpopular decision that is right for the long term. A leader who equates being busy with being important will fill their calendar with reactive tasks that leave no room for strategic thought. But the leader who has practiced needing little approval, little validation, little certainty cannot be so easily manipulated or derailed. Their power comes from within, so it is stable and constant. They can listen to feedback without being destroyed by it because their self-worth isn't on the line. They can pivot their strategy when the facts change because their identity isn't tied to being right. They lead from a deep well of inner resourcefulness, making them calm, adaptable, and incredibly clear-headed. This journey toward inner freedom through minimalism is deeply personal and ongoing. It's not about deprivation, it's about liberation. It's the conscious audit of your life, your physical space, your calendar, your relationships, and your mental habits, to ask one simple, piercing question of each element: does this serve my purpose, or does it distract from it? Does this thing, this commitment, this thought pattern add to my strength and focus, or does it drain my energy and divide my attention? The act of removal is an act of creation. It creates space, time, and mental bandwidth for what truly matters. So let's make this practical. Look around your life, both the tangible and the intangible. What one non-essential could you remove to immediately gain a significant amount of focus? Is it the clutter on your desk that subconsciously distracts you every time you sit down to work? Is it the compulsive checking of social media that fractures your concentration throughout the day? Is it the desire to be involved in every decision, which prevents your team from taking ownership? Or is it the internal pressure to always say yes, which leaves you overcommitted and under-focused? Real power includes lifting others up. This might sound like a soft sentiment in a world that often equates leadership with dominance and decisiveness, but the Stoics saw it as a non-negotiable pillar of true strength. For them, justice wasn't just a societal ideal. It was a personal virtue, an internal compass that guided every interaction. It was about recognizing the inherent worth and reason in every other person and treating them with a fundamental respect, regardless of their status, their agreement with you, or whether anyone was there to see it. This commitment to fairness is one of the most powerful invisible self-rules a leader can adopt, because it builds a foundation of trust so solid that it can withstand any external pressure or conflict. A team that knows deep in its bones that their leader will always strive to be fair is a team that will give its absolute best, not out of obligation, but out of genuine loyalty and respect. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself of this duty in the private pages of his meditations. He wrote, "A man must stand erect, not be kept erect by others." But he also understood that his own strength was meaningless if it wasn't used to uphold justice for others. In another passage, he instructs himself, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they cannot tell good from evil, but I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own." And so none of them can hurt me. No one can implicate me in ugliness, nor can I feel angry at my relative or hate him. We were born to work together like feet, hands, and eyes. This is the Stoic foundation of fairness, a profound understanding that others act from their own ignorance and pain, and that our job is not to retaliate or sink to their level, but to consistently model justice and reason, especially when it's difficult and especially when it goes completely unnoticed. A magnificent modern example of this principle in action is the leadership of Abraham Lincoln, particularly in his formation of a team of rivals. After winning the presidency, Lincoln faced a nation tearing itself apart. Instead of surrounding himself with sycophants and yes-men who would simply affirm his own ideas, he made the startling and deeply stoic decision to appoint his most capable political opponents, men who had publicly scorned him and vigorously campaigned against him, to his cabinet. He didn't do this because he was a saint. He did it because he believed it was just and fair to recruit the best talent available for the monumental task of saving the Union, regardless of personal slights. He treated these rivals with respect, listened to their vehemently opposing views, and ultimately harnessed their talents for the greater good. This commitment to fairness over ego, to putting the mission above personal pride, created a cabinet of fierce debate that led to wiser, more resilient decisions. His invisible self-rule was to always act in the interest of what was right for the whole, not what was comfortable or flattering for himself. This practice of fairness extends far beyond grand historical gestures and into the daily fabric of our leadership. It's in the manager who ensures that credit for a successful project is distributed equitably among the entire team, not just hoarded by the most vocal members. It's in the business owner who pays a living wage and creates a culture where every employee feels physically and psychologically safe, recognizing that their dignity is not negotiable. It's in the parent who listens to each child's perspective with an equal measure of attention and respect. These are the invisible applications of justice that build unshakable cohesion. People may not always be able to articulate why they trust a particular leader, but often it boils down to this: they have consistently experienced that person as fair. They know that even in a disagreement, their perspective will be heard and considered. They know that the rules apply to everyone equally, and that the leader's favor cannot be bought with flattery. This creates an environment where people can focus on their work and their growth, rather than wasting energy on office politics or protecting themselves from capricious treatment. So let's bring this virtue of justice down from the philosophical level and into the realm of immediate practical action. The opportunity to practice fairness is present in countless small moments throughout your day. It appears when you're mediating a dispute between colleagues. Will you side with your friend, or will you make a genuine effort to understand both sides impartially? It appears when you're giving feedback. Will you offer the same constructive, kind honesty to a high performer as you do to a struggling employee? It appears when you're allocating a coveted opportunity. Will you default to the usual suspects, or will you fairly consider who might benefit most and contribute best? The practice of justice is in the conscious, daily effort to see clearly and act rightly. With that in mind, where in your own sphere of influence can you practice greater fairness today? Is it in how you listen, how you assign credit, or how you make that next difficult decision? Epictetus, who understood better than most that our inner world dictates our outer reality, laid down a challenge that still resonates today. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. This is far more than a motivational poster quote. It's a stark declaration of a fundamental leadership responsibility. Your mind is your command center, and just as a general would never allow the enemy to simply wander into their headquarters, A Stoic leader understands that they must stand guard at the doorway of their own thoughts. Every piece of information, every conversation, every media fragment that enters your mind is either a tool that will build your focus and resilience or a pollutant that will cloud your judgment and drain your energy. The discipline of thought is the ultimate act of self-defense and strategic advantage, because the battles you win on the internal landscape are the ones that determine your success on the external field. This practice of mental curation begins with a simple but profound recognition. You are not your thoughts. You are the gatekeeper who chooses which thoughts to entertain, which to challenge, and which to dismiss. A leader who hasn't cultivated this discipline is like a ship with no one at the helm, tossed about by every wave of bad news, every rumor, and every emotional reaction. But the leader who guards their mind understands that while they cannot control every thought that appears, they have absolute sovereignty over which ones they grant power and attention. This means actively managing your mental input with the same rigor you would manage your finances or your calendar. It involves making conscious choices to avoid the toxic drain of gossip, which is nothing more than trading in the shortcomings of others at the expense of your own peace and focus. It means being ruthlessly selective about the media you consume, recognizing that a constant diet of negative news and outrage-driven content is a form of mental sabotage that fuels anxiety and helplessness rather than informed action. We can see a powerful, modern example of this principle in the daily habits of a leader like Bill Gates, who is known for his think weeks. These are dedicated periods where he physically removes himself from the noise of his company, the endless stream of emails, and the demands of daily leadership to sequester himself in a secluded cabin with nothing but a stack of books and research papers. This is not a vacation. It is a strategic and disciplined purification of his mental environment. He is deliberately shutting out the chaotic, reactive chatter of the world to create a space for deep, focused, and high-quality thought. By controlling his inputs so strictly, he ensures that his most important decisions and insights are generated from a place of clarity and depth, not from the reactive noise of the 24/7 news cycle or the latest office drama. He is, in essence, performing a deep clean of his mental operating system, ensuring that only the most valuable and constructive information gets processing power. This Stoic discipline extends into the very fabric of your daily interactions. It's the conscious decision to end a conversation that is veering into unproductive complaining. It's the rule to not check your news or social media feeds for the first hour of the day, protecting your fresh morning mindset from external agitation. It's the practice of pausing before you speak to ask yourself a simple filter question. Is what I'm about to say true, necessary, and kind? This one filter alone can eliminate a tremendous amount of mental clutter and interpersonal friction, preserving not only your own energy, but also fostering a more positive and productive environment for everyone around you. The leader who guards their mind doesn't do this to live in a bubble of ignorance. They do it to ensure their cognitive resources are reserved for solving real problems and pursuing meaningful goals, not for processing gossip, fear, and trivialities. This entire practice is built on the understanding that your attention is your most precious currency, and every time you spend it on something trivial or toxic, you are literally investing in your own distraction. The disciplined mind, therefore, is not a stiff or repressed one. It is a liberated one. It is free from the compulsive need to react, to know everything instantly, and to be constantly stimulated. It is a mind capable of profound focus, deep calm, and creative insight because it has been intentionally filled with nourishing content and protected from intellectual junk food. This creates a leader who is not easily knocked off balance by external events, because their internal state is governed by their own chosen principles, not by the chaos of the world. So, with all of this in mind, turn that lens inward for a moment. If you were to become the dedicated guardian of your own mental space, what one thought habit would most dramatically improve your overall mindset? Would it be the habit of consciously rejecting gossip? The practice of starting your day with silence instead of screens? Or perhaps the discipline of reframing a negative thought into a neutral or even constructive one as soon as it arises? How do leaders find the resolve to move forward when the path ahead is shrouded in fog and every instinct screams to retreat to safety? This is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it, a triumph that Stoicism defines not as blind recklessness, but as informed action. Stoic courage is the deliberate choice to act in accordance with your principles, even when every fiber of your being is pulled toward the comfort of inaction or the safety of the status quo. It is the understanding that the pain of compromising your core values is always far greater than the temporary discomfort of facing a fear. This brand of bravery is a calculated decision, a reasoned response where your commitment to what is right outweighs your desire for what is easy. Seneca, who lived his final years under the constant threat of his volatile student, the Emperor Nero, wrote extensively about this very tension. He observed, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." For him, courage wasn't about the grand, dramatic gesture. It was about the daily perseverance to live a life of virtue in a world that often rewards its opposite. He advised facing danger with reason as your guide, not emotion. He wrote, "The wise man will not fear danger, but he will avoid it. Yet, when it is necessary to face it, he will meet it with a mind prepared." This is the Stoic leader's blueprint for courage, a meticulous preparation of the mind that allows you to walk into the storm not because you are unafraid, but because your commitment to your duty is stronger than your fear. It is the ultimate expression of the dichotomy of control. You cannot control the outcome, but you can absolutely control the integrity of your effort and the principles from which you act. A powerful historical example of this principle in action is the leadership of Winston Churchill in the early, darkest days of World War II. In May of 1940, the situation was beyond dire. The French army was collapsing, the British Expeditionary Force was trapped at Dunkirk, and within his own war cabinet, there were strong voices, led by Foreign Secretary Lord Halifax, pushing for a negotiated peace with Hitler. The comfortable, seemingly rational choice was to explore a settlement to avoid the utter destruction of Britain. The path of principle, however, was to fight on against unimaginable odds to defend liberty at any cost. Churchill, armed with the courage of his convictions, faced down this internal opposition. He knew that a negotiated peace would mean the end of everything Britain stood for. In a series of decisive cabinet meetings, he argued with fierce resolve that Britain must continue the fight, famously declaring that if the empire were to last 1,000 years, this would be its finest hour. He moved forward into the terrifying uncertainty because he valued the principle of freedom over the comfort of a temporary, shameful security. His informed action, his stoic courage, changed the course of history. This kind of courage is not reserved for prime ministers and world wars. It appears in the executive who blows the whistle on unethical practices within her own company, risking her career for the principle of integrity. It lives in the manager who advocates for a struggling employee everyone else has given up on, defending the principle of fairness and potential. It is present in the entrepreneur who invests their life savings into an idea they believe in, embracing the vulnerability of failure for the principle of pursuing a vision. In each case, the leader feels the fear of financial ruin, social rejection, professional failure, but they have pre-committed to a set of values that are more important. Their courage is a form of loyalty not to a person or an institution, but to their own inviolable self-rule. It is the moment where their internal philosophy becomes external action, and in that moment they inspire everyone around them to also be a little braver. So let's turn the mirror inward. This isn't about comparing yourself to Churchill. It's about identifying the smaller, yet equally significant, battles in your own sphere of influence. What fear is currently holding you back from taking a right action? Is it the fear of a difficult conversation you know you need to have with a colleague or loved one? Is it the fear of launching that project because you're worried it won't be perfect? Is it the fear of sticking to a healthy habit when it would be easier to quit? Or is it the deeper fear of living according to your own values when the world seems to reward something else entirely? Identify that fear, not to judge it but to understand it. Then apply the Stoic filter. What principle is at stake? Is it honesty, compassion, justice, growth? Once you name the principle, your course of action becomes clear. The courage is found not in eliminating the fear, but in deciding that the principle is worth acting upon despite its presence. The most powerful leaders are not enslaved by more. This might be one of the most counterintuitive yet liberating truths we can embrace in a culture that constantly equates success with accumulation. More money, more followers, more market share, more accolades. But the Stoics identified this endless pursuit as a form of voluntary slavery, a trap where your sense of self-worth and your peace of mind become permanently tied to external markers you can never fully control. The antidote to this anxiety is not to achieve more, but to consciously and courageously define what enough means for you in every domain of your life. This act of definition is an invisible self-rule of tremendous power because it draws a clear line in the sand. On one side of that line is the territory of your genuine needs and values, where you are free to act with purpose and contentment. On the other side is the endless desert of wants, where you are forever chasing a mirage, your energy perpetually drained by the heat of insatiable desire. Epictetus, who knew the meaning of having very little in material terms, framed this not as a limitation, but as the ultimate liberation. He taught that freedom isn't about having everything you want, but about wanting less, about systematically training your desires to align with what is truly within your reach and truly necessary for a virtuous life. He said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." This is a radical recalibration of what it means to be rich. True wealth for a Stoic leader is measured by the number of things they can do without feeling diminished. It's the freedom that comes from knowing your happiness isn't contingent on the next promotion, the next acquisition, or the next round of applause. Your power becomes internal and unassailable because you have deliberately limited the number of hooks the outside world has in you. We can see this philosophy embodied in the life of a leader like Warren Buffett. Despite being one of the wealthiest individuals on the planet, his personal lifestyle is famously and deliberately modest. He still lives in the same house he bought in Omaha, Nebraska, for $31,500 in 1958. He drives himself to work and enjoys a diet that regularly includes McDonald's breakfast sandwiches. This isn't about being cheap. It's a profound expression of having defined enough a very long time ago. By removing the constant striving for more luxury, more status symbols, and more material complexity from his personal life, he conserves an immense amount of mental bandwidth and focus. That cognitive capital is then free to be invested entirely in what he truly loves and excels at, the analysis and long-term building of businesses. His power doesn't come from his ability to acquire. It comes from his disciplined lack of interest in acquisition for its own sake. He prioritized the impact of his investments, and the intellectual challenge of his work over the accumulation of symbols that would prove his success to others. This practice of sufficiency extends far beyond your bank account. You must define what enough means for your time, your energy, and your emotional commitments. A leader who hasn't defined enough for their work hours will forever be chasing productivity, feeling guilty for any moment of rest, and ultimately burning out. But a leader who sets a self-rule, for instance, I have done enough for today when I have completed my 3 most critical tasks, can walk away from their desk with a clear conscience and recharge fully. You must define what enough looks like in your relationships, what level of connection and presence truly fulfills you, rather than constantly seeking more validation or more social contacts out of a sense of lack. You must even define what enough information is before a decision. The leader who needs to read one more report, hear one more opinion, or wait for one more data point is often suffering from a failure to define enough evidence, leading to paralyzing indecision. In every case, drawing that boundary is an act of self-command that reduces distraction, curbs greed for more time, more approval, or more certainty, and channels your efforts into what is truly meaningful. So this invites a deeply personal and practical question, one that requires honest reflection on the invisible drivers of your own life. In what specific area do you most urgently need to define enough for yourself? Is it in your finances, where a clearer boundary could liberate you from anxiety and free up resources for more meaningful pursuits? Is it in your workaholism, where defining a stopping point each day would protect your health and your relationships? Is it in your consumption of news and social media, where a limit on your scrolling would reclaim hours of focus and mental peace? Or is it in your pursuit of external validation, where deciding that the respect of a few key people is enough would finally liberate you from the exhausting need to please everyone? Identify that one area where the endless pursuit of more has its grip on you, and dare to draw your line. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor who led Rome through war and plague, left us a directive that might seem surprising coming from a figure of such immense power. He wrote in his private meditations, "Kindness is unconquerable, so long as it is without flattery or hypocrisy. For what can the most insolent man do to you if you persist in being kind to him?" This reveals a profound layer of Stoic philosophy that is often overlooked: the idea that true strength isn't hardened or detached, but is actually rooted in a resilient and intelligent compassion. For the Stoic leader, kindness isn't a weakness to be exploited. It's a strategic and moral strength to be deployed. It's the understanding that you can hold people accountable to the highest standards while simultaneously holding space for their humanity. This is the delicate, powerful balance between unwavering resolve and genuine empathy, and it's governed by one of the most important invisible self-rules. I will treat everyone with dignity, but I will not confuse understanding with compromise. This practice begins with a fundamental Stoic principle, recognizing the shared nature of humanity. The Stoics believed that all people possess a spark of reason or logos, and that errors in judgment or action are a form of ignorance, not innate evil. When a team member underperforms or a colleague acts poorly, the Stoic leader's first impulse isn't to condemn the person, but to understand the root of the error. This isn't about making excuses for them. It's about diagnosing the problem accurately so the solution can be effective. It's the difference between saying, "You are incompetent," and asking, "What obstacle led to this outcome, and how can we remove it together?" The first approach attacks character and provokes defensiveness. The second addresses the situation and invites collaboration, all while maintaining the clear standard that the work must be done well. This is compassion with boundaries. The leader is empathetic to the struggle but resolute about the goal. A masterclass in this balanced leadership can be found in the approach of Abraham Lincoln with his generals during the Civil War. He was famously patient and compassionate with them, particularly with General George McClellan, who was notoriously arrogant, insubordinate, and pathologically cautious. Lincoln understood McClellan's immense skill at organizing an army and valued that capability. He endured months of delays and outright disrespect from his general, responding with kindness and repeated encouragement. However, Lincoln's compassion had a firm boundary: the survival of the Union. When it became undeniably clear that McClellan's paralysis was jeopardizing that ultimate goal, Lincoln, with deep regret but zero hesitation, relieved him of command. He didn't rage or vilify him, he simply made the necessary change. His kindness was unconquerable, it wasn't withdrawn because of the decision. He continued to recognize McClellan's talents and eventually found another role for him. Lincoln's self-rule was to lead with heart but to be ruled by principle. This balance is critical in modern leadership as well. Consider a manager who has an employee going through a difficult personal time, a divorce, an illness in the family, a mental health challenge. The compassionate response is to offer flexibility, resources, and a listening ear. This humanity builds immense loyalty and trust. However, the resolved response is to also clearly communicate the essential functions of the job that still need to be fulfilled, perhaps by temporarily redistributing tasks or adjusting timelines. The leader doesn't say, "Your personal life doesn't matter." Instead, they say, "Your well-being matters and the success of this team matters. Let's create a plan that honors both." This approach avoids the two common pitfalls: cold-hearted rigidity that destroys morale, and soft-hearted leniency that allows performance to crater and creates resentment among other team members who have to pick up the slack. The Stoic leader navigates this narrow path with grace, proving that care and accountability are not opposites but essential partners. Cultivating this kind of compassionate resolve requires a deep security in your own principles. Your boundaries must be so clear to you that you are not afraid to be kind, because you know that your kindness will not be mistaken for permission to lower standards. It allows you to deliver difficult feedback without a trace of personal malice, because the feedback is about the action and its impact on the shared mission, not about the worth of the individual. It enables you to make the hard, necessary decision without needing to dehumanize the person affected by it. Your compassion becomes a source of strength that makes your resolve more palatable and therefore more effective. People will follow a leader who is both strong and human because they feel both challenged and safe. So, as you reflect on your own leadership in your office, your home, or your community, ask yourself this: where is there an opportunity for you to lead with more heart without compromising a single one of your core principles? Is it in offering more grace to someone who is struggling while still being clear about expectations? Is it in listening more deeply to an opposing viewpoint without feeling your own conviction waver? Rushing often undermines influence. In our frantic, fast-paced world, we're conditioned to believe that speed is synonymous with competence and that immediate action is the hallmark of a decisive leader. But the Stoics understood a deeper, more counterintuitive truth: that true power often resides not in the frantic dash, but in the ability to stand still, to wait, to watch, and to strike only when the moment is precisely right. This is the art of strategic patience, an invisible self-rule that separates reactive managers from visionary leaders. It's the cultivated capacity to endure the tension of inaction, to hold your resources in reserve, and to understand that a well-timed pause can be far more impactful than a poorly timed leap. Seneca, the great Stoic thinker and advisor, wrote extensively about the critical difference between speed and haste. He observed, "Wait for the right time. There is a time for great things." He wasn't advocating for procrastination or laziness. He was championing a form of active, intelligent waiting. He believed that wisdom often looks like deliberation, and that by rushing headlong into action, we are often governed by our passions, our fear of missing out, our anxiety to be seen as productive, or our ego's need to assert control. Strategic patience, by contrast, is an act of reason. It's the disciplined choice to allow a situation to mature, for more information to reveal itself, or for an opponent's position to weaken before you commit your energy. This self-rule ensures that when you do act, your movement is not a frantic flail but a precise and powerful stroke. We can see a masterful historical application of this principle in the military strategy of George Washington during the American Revolutionary War. For years, he was criticized for his apparent caution, for refusing to engage the superior British army in a large-scale, decisive battle that he knew he would likely lose. He endured immense pressure from his own troops, from Congress, and from the public to act more aggressively, but Washington understood Stoic patience instinctively. He knew that his army was not just a fighting force, it was a symbol. Its mere existence kept the revolution alive. So his primary strategy was one of preservation and timing, to avoid catastrophic defeat, to wear down the British through smaller engagements and attrition, and to wait for the perfect moment when the geopolitical stars aligned. That moment finally arrived at Yorktown in 1781. He learned that the French fleet was sailing to block a British escape by sea. Instead of rushing, he meticulously coordinated a secret overland march from New York to Virginia, combining American and French forces to lay a perfect siege. His years of patience, of avoiding the impulsive error, culminated in the decisive victory that won the war. His waiting was not passive. It was a strategic gathering of force that allowed him to act with overwhelming effect at the exact right time. This practice is just as vital in the boardroom or in our personal lives as it is on the battlefield. A leader might feel tremendous pressure to launch a new product to counter a competitor's move. The impulsive reaction is to rush something, anything, to market, but the leader who practices strategic patience takes a breath. They ask, is our product truly ready? Or are we about to launch a half-baked solution that will damage our reputation? Is this the right season for this launch? Or would waiting 3 months allow us to build more anticipation and secure better partners? This patience is a competitive advantage. It allows you to learn from the missteps of those who rushed in first. It gives you space to refine your offering until it is not just a reaction, but a superior solution. Patience in hiring prevents bringing on the wrong person out of desperation. Patience in negotiation prevents accepting a poor deal out of fear. Patience in investing prevents chasing a trend after it has already peaked. In every case, this deliberate pause creates the space for wisdom to catch up to impulse. So where in the landscape of your own ambitions and responsibilities do you need to introduce more of this strategic patience? Is it in a business venture where you're tempted to expand too quickly before your systems are solid? Is it in a relationship where pushing for a resolution might actually destroy the trust that only time can rebuild? Or is it in your own personal development where you're growing frustrated that mastery hasn't arrived overnight? Identify the area where your desire for speed is actually working against your goal for lasting impact. What would you do if you knew with absolute certainty that nothing you built, no position you held, and no relationship you cherished would last forever? This isn't a question designed to induce despair, but to unleash a particular kind of fearless, focused energy that is essential for transformative leadership. The Stoics called this practice apathy, a love of fate, and at its core is a radical acceptance of impermanence. They understood that our deepest resistance to action often stems from a hidden, desperate desire to create something permanent in a world that is fundamentally transient. We delay launching that project, having that difficult conversation, or pivoting our strategy because we are secretly hoping for a guarantee of success, for a perfect set of conditions that will never arrive. But when you fully internalize the truth that everything is in a state of flux, your business, your health, your current role, a profound shift occurs. The stakes feel lower, not in terms of importance, but in terms of ego. You are freed from the burden of needing your actions to create everlasting monuments, and instead, you can focus on making them meaningful and right for this moment. Marcus Aurelius, leading an empire he knew would one day crumble, constantly meditated on this reality to ground his own actions. He wrote in his private journal, "Keep in mind how fast things pass by and are gone, those that are now and those to come. Existence flows past us like a river, the infinite behind us is closed, and the abyss of the future is equally boundless." He wasn't being morbid, he was being strategic. By reminding himself of the fleeting nature of his own life and power, he was inoculating himself against the paralysis of pride and the fear of loss. This awareness didn't make him passive, it made him urgently active. It forced him to ask, if my time and my influence are this limited, what is the most essential thing I can do with them today? This mindset is the ultimate catalyst for bold action because it replaces the question, what if I fail? With a more powerful question, what if I wait too long and never try at all? We can see this principle animated in the breathtaking career of Steve Jobs. His famous Stanford commencement speech in 2005 is a masterclass in Stoic impermanence, delivered after his first cancer diagnosis. He stated plainly, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life." He explained that the awareness of death, the ultimate impermanence, strips away all external expectations, pride, and fear of embarrassment. It leaves only what is truly important. This wasn't just a speech, it was the operating system behind his most daring decisions. Knowing that Apple, his own creation, could vanish just as easily as it had arrived, he took colossal risks. He cannibalized the wildly successful iPod with the iPhone because he knew that if he didn't make his own products obsolete, someone else would. He pushed his teams to pursue insanely great ideas not because he was certain they would work, but because he was certain that the opportunity to try them was temporary. His acceptance of endings is what gave him the courage to create revolutionary new beginnings. This leadership superpower transforms your relationship with failure. When you know that even your most spectacular failure will eventually be washed away by the river of time, it loses its terrifying permanence. A failed product launch becomes a valuable lesson that informs your next attempt, not a tombstone for your career. A rejected proposal is merely data, not a verdict on your worth. This perspective encourages a culture of intelligent experimentation, where teams are empowered to try bold things because the cost of a single misstep is understood to be temporary and containable. The leader who embraces impermanence doesn't celebrate failure, but they refuse to be defined or immobilized by it. They understand that the only true failure is inaction, the failure to use the precious and fleeting time you have been given to act in accordance with your values and your vision. So let's bring this from the philosophical to the intensely practical. Look at your own life and leadership with this Stoic lens of temporality. What is the one thing you have been hesitating on, not because it lacks merit, but because you are afraid of the change it will bring or the uncertainty of its outcome? Is it the business idea you've been nurturing for years but are afraid to launch? the necessary restructuring of your team that you keep delaying because it will be uncomfortable. The decision to finally pursue a different career path that feels more aligned with your purpose. Now, hold that hesitation up against the stark, liberating truth that nothing is guaranteed and nothing lasts. This very situation, this very opportunity, and even this very fear are all temporary. They will pass. The question is, will they pass with you as a passive observer, or will you have shaped them through your courageous action? What have you been putting off because you were waiting for a sign, for a guarantee, or for the perfect moment that, in a world of constant change, will never actually come? Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher and statesman, offered a simple yet transformative piece of advice that has echoed through the centuries. He wrote, "You should call your mind to account each day. When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day and go back over what I have done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by." This nightly ritual of self-examination wasn't about self-punishment or dwelling on mistakes. It was a leader's most sophisticated tool for continuous, deliberate growth. In the quiet space of reflection, the events of the day are transformed from a chaotic sequence of reactions into a curated library of lessons. It's the process where experience is metabolized into wisdom, ensuring that you aren't just getting older, but you are actively getting better. This practice of daily review is the engine of adaptive leadership. Without it, we are doomed to repeat the same patterns, make the same errors in judgment, and remain blind to our own biases. A leader who doesn't reflect is like a ship's captain who never checks their navigational charts. They might feel like they're moving forward, but they have no real idea if they're off course or heading straight for the rocks. Self-reflection provides that crucial course correction. It allows you to audit your performance against your own stated values. Did my actions today align with my principles? Was I courageous in that meeting, or did I avoid a difficult truth to keep the peace? Did I act with justice and fairness, or did I show favoritism? This isn't about achieving perfection. It's about pursuing conscious progress. It's the mechanism that closes the gap between the leader you aspire to be and the leader you were today, ensuring that tomorrow you can narrow that gap just a little bit more. The most effective leaders throughout history have woven this Stoic exercise into the very fabric of their daily lives through quiet, consistent rituals. For many, this takes the form of journaling, not as a diary of events, but as a structured interrogation of their own choices. They might use a framework of probing questions each evening. Where did I let my emotions override my reason today? What is one thing I could have done better? When did I practice virtue, and when did I fall short? For others, the ritual is one of pure, quiet contemplation. A dedicated 20-minute walk without a phone or podcast, simply turning the day over in their mind, observing what surfaces without judgment. These practices create a sacred space for honesty, a private board meeting with your most important stakeholder, your future self. We see the profound impact of this habit in a modern leader like Ray Dalio, the founder of the world's largest hedge fund, Bridgewater Associates. Dalio is a vocal advocate of radical transparency and relentless self-reflection, principles he embedded into his company's culture. He developed a system of issue logs and encouraged every employee to provide constant, candid feedback on each other's performance, including his own. But at the core of this system was his personal commitment to daily reflection. He treated every mistake, every market misjudgment, not as a failure to be hidden, but as a priceless puzzle to be solved. He would meticulously document what he called painful lessons, analyzing the root cause of the error and codifying a new principle to prevent it from happening again. This disciplined, almost scientific approach to daily review allowed him to evolve his strategies and his leadership style continuously, turning personal and professional stumbles into the very foundation of his immense success. This transformative power lies in the shift from being a passive participant in your life to becoming its active, curious student. Reflection is how you mine the raw ore of your daily experiences for the gold of self-knowledge. It reveals your triggers, your hidden assumptions, and your unconscious patterns. Perhaps you notice that your most impatient reactions always come when you're hungry or tired, revealing a need to better manage your physical energy. Maybe you see a pattern of avoiding certain types of conversations, pointing to a deeper fear of conflict that needs addressing. This isn't navel-gazing, it's strategic reconnaissance on the battlefield of your own mind. By understanding your internal landscape with this clarity, you preempt your own weaknesses and amplify your strengths, making your leadership more intentional and far less reactive. So this brings us to a question that can unlock a wealth of personal insight, a question that Seneca might have asked himself in the flickering candlelight of his study. It's a question that requires no special tools, no extra time, just a moment of honest curiosity before you sleep. What did yesterday teach you about yourself? Did it reveal a reservoir of patience you didn't know you had when a project went sideways? Did it show you how quickly a careless word can create tension, teaching you the weight of your communication? Or did it perhaps highlight a moment where you chose comfort over courage, revealing an area for growth? The answer doesn't have to be monumental. Often, the smallest lessons are the most profound because they are the threads that, when woven together, create the unshakable fabric of your character. People trust those who are predictable in their values, not those who are perfect in their actions. This is a subtle but profound distinction that lies at the heart of building lasting credibility. When someone knows with near certainty how you will react under pressure, what principles will guide your decisions, and what lines you will never cross, they don't have to waste energy guessing your motives or protecting themselves from your unpredictability. This kind of trust isn't built through grand, one-off gestures. It is painstakingly assembled through the daily, often invisible, repetition of small, consistent behaviors. It is the direct and undeniable result of unwavering self-discipline, of having a set of internal rules so deeply ingrained that your external conduct becomes reliably coherent, regardless of the circumstances. This alignment between what we say and what we do was a cornerstone of Epictetus's teachings. He challenged his students with a piercing question. If you have not even tried to be consistent, how can you call yourself a philosopher? For him, philosophy was not an abstract intellectual exercise. It was a lived practice of integrity. He argued that a person who preaches courage but flees from difficulty, or who advocates for honesty but tells convenient white lies, does more damage to the cause of virtue than someone who makes no claims at all. This hypocrisy, however small, creates a crack in the foundation of trust. Conversely, the individual whose actions are a perfect mirror of their words, even when it is difficult or costly, builds a reputation of solidity. People are drawn to that consistency like a ship to a steady lighthouse in a stormy sea. It provides a reliable point of navigation in an uncertain world. We can witness the immense power of this principle in the leadership of someone like Fred Rogers, the beloved host of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. His influence, which spanned generations, was not built on charisma or authority, but on an almost radical consistency of character. On camera and off, he embodied the same gentle, patient, and deeply respectful values. He didn't just talk about kindness, he lived it in every interaction, from how he spoke to a child to how he treated the camera crew. There were no separate personas, no hidden agendas. This unwavering alignment between his message and his being created an atmosphere of profound psychological safety. Children and parents alike trusted him implicitly because he was, quite simply, predictable in his goodness. His self-discipline was evident in his meticulous preparation, his calm demeanor, and his relentless focus on his core mission. He had an invisible self-rule: everyone deserves respect, and he applied it with such consistency that it became the bedrock of his immense credibility, and the reason his lessons continue to resonate so powerfully decades later. This kind of trust is the currency of effective leadership in any context. In a business, a manager whose mood swings unpredictably from meeting to meeting creates an environment of anxiety and hesitation. Team members become more focused on managing the manager's emotions than on doing good work. But a leader whose reactions are measured and whose standards are consistently applied, even on a bad day, fosters a culture of psychological safety. People know what to expect, so they can focus their energy on innovation and execution, confident that they understand the rules of the game and that those rules will not change arbitrarily. This consistency in applying values fairness in reviews, transparency in communication, respect in disagreements, is what transforms a group of individuals into a loyal, cohesive team. They follow not because they have to, but because they trust the person leading them. The challenge, of course, is that true consistency is incredibly difficult. It requires the self-discipline to act according to your principles even when you are tired, stressed, disappointed, or tempted to take the easy way out. It means making the same right choice over and over again, especially when no one is watching to give you credit for it. This is where those invisible self-rules earn their name. They are the private standards you uphold that eventually become your public reputation. Every time you choose to respond calmly to a provoking email instead of firing off an angry reply, you are reinforcing a rule. Every time you admit a mistake openly instead of hiding it, you are building trust. Every time you follow through on a small promise, you are making a deposit in your credibility account. This is the unglamorous, daily work of integrity that compounds over time into an unshakable foundation of trust. So this invites a moment of courageous self-audit, a quiet examination of the gaps between your aspirations and your actions. Where does your own inconsistency subtly weaken the trust others place in you? Is it in the small promises you make to yourself and others that you let slide, saying you'll follow up and then forgetting, or committing to a deadline you know you can't meet? Is it in the values you profess to hold dear in a team meeting, but then compromise when under pressure to deliver results quickly? Perhaps it's in your emotional reactivity, being patient and understanding one day, but short-tempered and dismissive the next, leaving people unsure of which version of you they will encounter. Identifying these patterns isn't about self-condemnation. It's the first and most necessary step toward building the self-discipline required to become a leader worthy of deep, unwavering trust. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who advised an emperor, cut straight to the heart of our most precious commodity when he wrote, "We are not given a short life, but we make it short, and we are not ill-supplied but wasteful of it." This is a startlingly modern insight into a form of frugality that has nothing to do with money and everything to do with our two most finite resources, time and energy. For a leader, this isn't about being cheap, it's about being strategic. It's the disciplined practice of treating every minute and every ounce of your mental and physical capacity as a non-renewable currency to be invested only in pursuits that yield a meaningful return on your core mission. This is the ultimate application of the dichotomy of control. You cannot create more time, but you have absolute authority over how you spend it. This begins with a ruthless and ongoing audit of your attention. The modern world is a minefield of distractions designed to hijack your focus: endless notifications, the siren call of social media, meetings that could have been emails, and the constant pressure to be constantly busy. The leader who hasn't established self-rules around these drains will find their days dissolving into a reactive blur of activity that feels productive but accomplishes very little of actual importance. The Stoic leader, by contrast, approaches their schedule with the precision of a master investor. They understand that a distracted mind is an ineffective mind, and they deliberately design their environment and their habits to protect their focus. This might mean implementing a rule of no emails for the first 2 hours of the day to dedicate that peak mental energy to deep, strategic work. It could mean batching all administrative tasks into a single, focused block rather than letting them fragment your attention throughout the day. It is the conscious decision to say no, or more powerfully, hell no, to requests, opportunities, and commitments that do not align with your top priorities, even if they are good things. Every yes to something unimportant is a no to something that truly matters. We can see a powerful embodiment of this principle in the legendary focus of Warren Buffett. His approach to time management is a direct reflection of Stoic frugality. The story is told of his pilot who once discussed his career goals with Buffett. After listening, Buffett advised him to make a list of his top 25 career goals. Then he told him to circle the top 5, and this is the crucial part, to avoid the remaining 20 at all costs. They were not a backup plan. They were avoid at all cost items because they were attractive enough to distract him from his absolute highest priorities. Buffett himself applies this same ruthless focus to his own work. He is famously selective about his commitments, guarding his calendar ferociously to ensure his time is spent on his one primary job, analyzing companies and making investment decisions. He doesn't try to do everything, he tries to do a few things exceptionally well. This isn't a lack of curiosity. It's a profound understanding that dilution of focus leads to dilution of results. His power comes from his intense concentration on his circle of competence and his unshakable discipline in ignoring everything outside of it. This practice of guarding your energy is just as critical as guarding your time. Energy is the fuel that powers your focus, your decision-making, and your emotional resilience. A leader who is energetically depleted is far more likely to be reactive, irritable, and prone to poor judgment. Stoic frugality here means identifying the people, the activities, and even the thought patterns that act as energy vampires. It might be that colleague who constantly dwells on problems without seeking solutions, draining the optimism from the room. It could be the habit of ruminating on a past mistake long after the lesson has been extracted. It might be the lack of a firm boundary between work and rest, allowing your professional concerns to bleed into your personal time and prevent genuine recovery. Protecting your energy requires setting clear boundaries, not as walls to keep people out, but as fences to preserve what is vital within you. It means scheduling rest and rejuvenation with the same seriousness you schedule a board meeting, because you understand that a well-rested leader is a more effective, more creative, and more compassionate leader. So this brings us to a deeply personal and practical question, one that requires a moment of honest inventory. Look back over the last week of your life. What single activity, commitment, or interaction drained a significant amount of your time or energy without adding any real value to your most important goals? Was it the hour lost scrolling through news feeds that left you feeling anxious and distracted instead of informed? Was it the meeting you attended out of obligation that produced no decisions and consumed the precious morning hours you reserve for your best work? Was it the unresolved conflict you replayed in your mind over and over, draining your emotional reserves long after the event was over? Identifying this drain is the first step toward practicing Stoic frugality. The next step is to ask the far more empowering question: what is one rule I could put in place, one invisible self-rule that would protect me from this drain in the future? How can something that stings so deeply actually become a source of your greatest strength? The Stoics reframed criticism not as a personal attack to be deflected, but as a rare and valuable form of data, an external perspective that can reveal blind spots you are incapable of seeing on your own. For a leader, the ability to metabolize dissent and disapproval into fuel for growth is a superpower, and it's powered by one crucial invisible self-rule: I will separate the message from the messenger and mine every piece of feedback for its potential nugget of truth, no matter how poorly it is delivered. This isn't about becoming a doormat or accepting every critique as valid. It's about developing the emotional and intellectual filters to receive feedback without your ego hijacking the process, allowing you to extract actionable insight while calmly discarding the rest. Marcus Aurelius, a man who faced constant criticism from senators, generals, and rivals, provided the perfect mental model for this in his Meditations. He wrote, "If anyone can prove and show to me that I think and act in error, I will gladly change, for I seek the truth by which no one was ever truly harmed." It is only the person who continues in self-deception and ignorance who is harmed. This is a breathtakingly powerful stance. He is essentially saying that his commitment to truth and improvement is so absolute that he is actively grateful to anyone who points out his mistakes, regardless of their motives. He doesn't waste a single ounce of energy being offended by the tone or the source. He immediately bypasses that emotional reaction and goes straight to the content. Is this true? If it is, he gains a priceless opportunity to correct an error and become better. If it isn't, he loses nothing. This reframe transforms a critic from an adversary into an unpaid advisor, someone who is potentially doing you the immense favor of highlighting a weakness you can now address. We can see this principle in action in the remarkable turnaround of a company like Microsoft under its current CEO, Satya Nadella. When he took over in 2014, the company was widely criticized as being past its prime, a bureaucratic, inward-looking giant that had missed the mobile revolution and was being overtaken by more agile competitors. The easy, ego-driven response would have been to become defensive, to dismiss the critics as uninformed, and to double down on the existing strategy. But Nadella embodied a more stoic approach. He encouraged a culture of radical listening and learning. He didn't hear the criticism as "Microsoft is bad." He heard it as vital market data pointing to a need for profound change. This openness to feedback, this willingness to be criticized and to use it as fuel, was a key ingredient in Microsoft's cultural transformation. It allowed them to pivot towards cloud computing and open-source collaboration, moves that seemed heretical to the old guard, but that have since led the company to unprecedented growth and innovation. The criticism didn't break them, it broke them open. This practice requires building what we might call a filtering system for feedback. The first filter is the question of source. Is this criticism coming from someone whose opinion I respect? Do they have relevant knowledge or experience? If the answer is yes, you lean in and listen with intense focus, even if it's painful. If the answer is no, you might still listen, but you weigh the content much more carefully against your own knowledge and values. The second filter is the question of pattern. Is this a one-off comment, or is it a recurring piece of feedback from multiple, unrelated sources? If multiple people are telling you you're a poor listener, or that your presentations are confusing, that pattern is the signal you need to pay attention to, cutting through the noise of any single delivery. The third and most important filter is the Stoic question of control. You cannot control how the feedback is delivered, whether it's shouted in anger or whispered in jealousy. But you have 100% control over how you choose to interpret it, what meaning you assign to it, and what you decide to do with it. This filtering system allows you to stand firm in your core value of self-improvement without being swayed by every gust of opinion or wounded by every arrow of dissent. So let's make this practical and immediate. Bring to mind a piece of criticism you've received recently. It might have been a performance review at work, a comment from a partner about a habit, or even a negative online review for something you created. Before you dismiss it or dwell on the hurt, put it through the Stoic filters. First, try to completely decouple the message from the emotion and the messenger. Strip it down to its raw, factual core. What is the underlying concern or observation? Second, ask yourself the Marcus Aurelius question: is there any truth here, however small? Is there even a 5% chance that this feedback is accurate? If there is, that 5% is pure gold. It's a free roadmap to a personal upgrade. That doesn't mean you have to accept all 100% of the critique, but it does mean you now have a valuable data point you didn't have before. What one recent piece of criticism, if you dared to see it as potentially helpful data, could you use to constructively improve your work, your relationships, or your leadership? True influence outlives titles and power because it is not granted by a position or a vote. It is earned through the consistent demonstration of character, long after any official authority has faded away. This is the ultimate promise of the Stoic self-rules we've explored. They are not a strategy for temporary advantage, but the architecture of a legacy. While commands are forgotten and decrees are overturned, the impact of a life lived with integrity, resilience, and virtue continues to ripple through time, influencing generations who may never even know your name. Your official title gives you control, but your character earns you respect, and respect is the only thing that truly endures because it is written not on paper, but on the hearts of those you've led, served, and uplifted. Philosophically grounded leaders understand that their daily choices are the bricks with which they are building their lasting monument. A leader who rules by fear might achieve short-term compliance, but they leave behind a legacy of resentment and relief when they are gone. In stark contrast, a leader who governs themselves by invisible rules of justice, courage, and compassion builds a legacy of inspiration. They create a culture, a standard, a way of being that becomes embedded in the very fabric of their organization, their family, or their community. This is why the Stoics placed such immense importance on virtue as the sole good. It is the only possession that cannot be taken from you, and it is the only thing you can genuinely leave behind that retains its value and power indefinitely. Your actions become a living lesson that teaches others how to lead long after you have stepped aside. We can see this profound long-term impact in the legacy of someone like Abraham Lincoln. His official power as president was temporary, lasting only a few tumultuous years. But the self-rules that guided him, his immense capacity for empathy, his commitment to justice and union, his resilience in the face of unbearable personal and national tragedy transcended his presidency entirely. He wasn't just managing a civil war, he was redefining the moral character of a nation. His legacy isn't just the Emancipation Proclamation as a document, it's the enduring ideal of a more perfect union, the standard of leadership that values principle over popularity, and the example of how to wield power with profound humility. His influence did not end with his assassination. It was amplified by it, setting a benchmark for moral courage that American leaders are still measured against today. His inner strength became a national inheritance. This is the beautiful, empowering inversion that Stoicism offers. You don't build a legacy by focusing on the legacy itself. That leads to posturing and building a fragile personal brand. You build it by focusing on the quality of your character in this present moment. The legacy is simply the inevitable byproduct, the shadow cast by a life well lived. Every time you choose patience over irritation, accountability over blame, or courage over comfort, you are not just solving an immediate problem, you are casting a vote for the person you are becoming and etching a line in the story that will be told about you. The compound interest of these small, consistent acts of self-rule is a reputation of unshakable strength and a legacy of positive influence that operates on its own without your continued presence. So this brings us to the most important question you can ask yourself, a question that cuts through the noise of daily busyness and connects your smallest actions to your largest impact. How do you truly want to be remembered? Not what you want to have accomplished, but how you want to be described by the people who knew you best. Do you want to be remembered as the person who was always calm under pressure, or the one who was quick to react, as the leader who lifted others up, or the one who protected their own status? As the individual who acted with unwavering integrity, or the one who cut corners when it was convenient? Your honest answer to that question reveals your deepest values. And once you know that, the path becomes clear. What is the one single, daily, invisible self-rule, the one discipline of thought or action that, if you practiced it without fail, would most powerfully shape that legacy into reality? Is it the rule of pausing before you speak? The rule of always asking what is right, not what is easy, or the rule of ending each day with honest reflection? Identify that rule, and you have found the chisel you will use to sculpt your enduring mark on the world. And so we arrive at the heart of the matter, the quiet truth that has echoed through every story and every lesson. The most powerful leadership you will ever embody does not come from a title on a door or a command given to others. It is built from the inside out, brick by brick, through the invisible self-rules you choose to live by when absolutely no one is watching. This is the Stoic secret, the unshakable foundation. It is the daily, disciplined practice of self-mastery that allows you to lead with calm instead of chaos. It is the resilient spirit that learns to see obstacles not as roadblocks, but as the very training ground for strength. It is the unwavering commitment to virtue, to acting with justice, courage, wisdom, and temperance that earns you a trust no mandate can ever confer. And it is the profound intentionality that ensures your actions are chosen, not merely reacted with, aligning your every move with a purpose far greater than momentary impulse. Seneca, with his piercing clarity, captured the ultimate reward of this inner work when he wrote, "The man who has become self-reliant and serene, having classified all things as either nothing to him or not to be pursued too eagerly, such a man has attained the highest good." This is the inner freedom that every great leader ultimately seeks, not freedom to do anything you want, but freedom from being controlled by your own worst impulses, your fleeting passions, and your fragile ego. It is the freedom to act from a place of deep principle, no matter what storms rage around you. Your journey with these ideas doesn't end when this video does. In many ways, it is just beginning. The most important step you can take right now is to make this philosophy practical and personal. Don't try to overhaul your entire life at once. Instead, look back over the principles we've discussed and ask yourself, which one resonates most deeply with the challenge I'm facing today? Is it the dichotomy of control and the need to stop wasting energy on things outside my command? Is it the practice of negative visualization to build resilience against future fear? Or is it the simple, powerful discipline of an evening review to close each day with honest self-reflection? Choose just one Stoic practice. Adopt it as your own invisible self-rule for the next week. Observe the subtle but profound shift it creates in your clarity, your calm, and your capacity to lead. We would truly love to hear about your choice. Which principle from Stoic philosophy resonated most powerfully with you? Was it the concept of virtuous action, the power of strategic patience, or the idea of cultivating inner freedom by needing less? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue this conversation and learn from each other's journeys. If you found value in exploring how ancient wisdom can inform modern leadership, consider subscribing to this channel for more content that helps you apply these timeless principles to your daily life. Thank you for investing this time in your own growth. Remember, the path to influential leadership is not a destination you reach, but a practice you live, one intentional choice at a time.